Hello and welcome to the Make Money with Mace podcast. I'm your host, Mace, and let's get right into the NFL Divisional round. So, with the NFL Divisional round upon us and everything, it's nice to say I had a decent wildcard weekend, ultimately going, I believe it was because I went 1-1, so I went 4-2 on the weekend, which, not a terrible weekend. Definitely a positive change for what's been going on. Absolutely. So, gonna try to keep that vibe going. That's what I'm hoping for. So, starting off the first game, Saturday, January 20th, 3:30. I believe that's 3:30, right? 4:30. Houston Texans at the Baltimore Ravens. We got ourselves an exact Week 1 rematch. Baltimore is a big favorite. They are a 9.5-point favorite. The line actually moved a point in their favor, and with good reason. The last time we saw Baltimore at full strength, they put up 56 on Miami, which is impressive no matter how you slice it. Putting up that much on an NFL team is impressive. Those guys are getting paid too. And that's what Baltimore does. They beat good teams consistently, greatly. Like they cause problems. They're so good. They're just like DVOA has them as the best team in football, and honestly, like it's hard not to disagree with how good they are. They have the number 4 offense by DVOA, number 1 defense by DVOA, number 3 special teams by DVOA. No one's even close to that. You have all 3 core units in the top 5. No other team, like I said, no other team is close to that. Every other team has like really significant flaws. So it's like just going off of that alone, we have to look at what Baltimore does well and what Houston does well, because Houston's very average. Like, to be very kind to them, they're a very average football team. They overperform big time. They actually overperformed their DVOA quite a bit because of the way Jacksonville played so well early in the year before Trevor got hurt, and then after Trevor got hurt, everything came off. Everything went bad. But Houston, obviously, like, great special teams unit, very disciplined, ranking 17th in that. And yeah, they just had a great performance against Cleveland. But I want to talk about what they can and can't do well. So, starting off with offense and just the particular matchups, right? If you look at just like sort of like their power rankings, quarterback difference, everything, right? You've got Lamar Jackson, who is probably going to win an MVP award, against CJ Stroud, who's a baller. And that's fairly even, right? If you want to say fairly even, but Lamar obviously needs to get it done in the playoffs, which he really hasn't had the opportunity to get it done in the playoffs with only 1 win under his belt in year 3. And last year he was hurt when they made the playoffs, so pretty tough to tell what he's going to be like when it comes to the playoffs. But I will say their offensive line's intact, their receiving core's intact. I don't believe Mark Andrews is playing. I could be wrong on that, but even if he's not, Isaiah Likely's been really good, and you can just keep it going with just a specific matchups. While Houston's defensive line was very impressive against Cleveland, Cleveland was down both their starting tackles. So they're able to take advantage of a statue in the pocket as well in Joe Flacco. Will Anderson and Jonathan Grenard were awesome. Christian Harris was awesome. All that's great. It's just a different animal. You have a much more cohesive offense. You just have a better overall team. And with that being the case, it's really hard to not think Baltimore's offense is going to be able to do what they want against Houston. Now, Lamar has struggled against the blitz this year. He's not been great against it. But I do think that it won't matter nearly as much because the Ravens love to run the ball. They get chunk plays out of the run. They do it differently than other teams. They run power to get those chunk plays, as opposed to that West Coast Shanahan scheme. And I think the offense will be able to score into the mid-20s very easily against Houston. Where the matchup truly swings is Baltimore's defense against Houston's offense. Houston's offense is great when CJ's balling, but it has stuttered quite a few times this year in ways I don't think people remember. Like, they only put up, I think, 15 points against Carolina. They only put up 18 against Atlanta. So they had some clunkers in there, which you expect with a rookie play caller and a rookie quarterback. And one of those clunkers was week 1 against Baltimore. Now, Baltimore specifically dominates. They absolutely dominate wide receivers. They make you beat them. You are forced to beat Baltimore without your wide receivers being able to function properly. And that's hard. It's hard enough as is when that's the case. Like, we saw San Francisco couldn't do it. Miami couldn't do it. Detroit couldn't do it. Seattle couldn't do it. Like, these teams with really good wide receivers, really good weapons, and they still can't do it. I think, like, Noah Brown obviously is just checking the injury. Yeah, Noah Brown is on IR, so he's out totally. So you're going to be relying on John Mechie and Robert Woods to really get things done, which is tough. It is, because you're already missing Tank Dell. So you're missing a really solid wide receiver in Noah Brown. You're missing Tank Dell. You're missing... you're not missing anything else besides that, but that's not good. It's not good. I know that Marlon Humphrey's been ruled out, which it's like, it is a big deal, but it's not that big a deal. If that makes sense. Baltimore's depth in the back end's crazy, and again, Nico Collins is going to be really the only receiver. Nico Collins and John Mechie are going to be the real impact receivers, and Baltimore does a fantastic job of reining in much better receivers than Nico Collins and John Mechie. As good as I think Nico Collins in particular is, I just think it's a very tough matchup for Houston's offense to function against Baltimore's defense, because they just beat the hell out of you. They are built up the middle, right? So, like, Justin Madubuike is their best pass rusher. That's internal pressure, which is the most disruptive sort of pressure, because it prevents good quarterbacks from stepping up in the pocket. And then you've got Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen gobbling up everything in the middle. Kyle Hamilton's a freak at safety. He can cover any position on the field. And he just erases players when he's asked to do it one-on-one. And then you have, like, just a bunch of, like, B to B plus level players in their that don't make stupid mistakes. It's such a fundamentally sound defense, and that's where I think Baltimore is going to win the day. So in terms of a bet, Baltimore to cover is less and less enticing, because 10 points is a lot in the playoffs. It just is. Right? Especially with Houston playing really above board. Will Anderson and Jonathan Grenard are liable to make things difficult on any quarterback. And you have CJ Stroud, who could just ball out a little bit, right? But we have to also just remember that this isn't Cleveland. Like, as much hype as Cleveland's defense got because they have Myles Garrett and how good they were early in the year, and especially at home, Baltimore's, again, just a different animal. They are not a roll over and die team like Cleveland is. You have, I guess, like, the way to put it is, like, obviously Baltimore, 3 of their losses were at home, right? But one was Tyler Huntley, so really it was 6-2. And one was a bizarre game in which there was like 7 drops in it. And the other was a bizarre game where there was also like a bunch of drops and they just couldn't put away the Colts of all teams. So all that being said, I think Baltimore ends up winning the game. I kind of like the under. Baltimore's 8-9 to the under this year. Or 8-9 to the over. Houston's 7-11 to the over. These teams aren't going to score that much, and they didn't score that much in their first matchup. And I think their first matchup is pretty indicative of what we're going to see. Where Baltimore won 25-9. I think it can be closer than that. I think it could be like 21-14. I think it could be 27-10. I don't really see I don't really see a world where Baltimore breaks 30. I don't really see a world where they cover it on their own, but I also don't see a world where Houston overcomes Baltimore's defensive depth, or is able to really truly stop Lamar Jackson, especially with the way the receivers are playing now. Like Zay Flowers has found his groove, Isaiah Likely's broken out. You just have a much more fundamentally sound offense. And to give Houston credit, they're playing better than they were week one, obviously. So, all that being said, I think the Ravens' track record sort of speaks for itself. And 9.5 is rich. You needed them to win by 10. I like the under. Maybe the under in the money line is a good parlay. But for my best bet, I think under 34.5 is fairly reliable. Or 34.5, Jesus, that's a Patriots under. 43.5, I think, is a reasonable number. DraftKings has it at minus 108. FanDuel has it at minus 110. It's basically, do you see this game getting to 24-20? And I frankly don't. I think that this game will live 24-17, 20-13, be a tight, close game, but I think Baltimore comes out on top. So yeah, that's what I think for the first matchup. The next matchup's kind of hilarious because we know what Aaron Rodgers was like when he was having to go back to California. Jordan Love, we have known nothing about, and frankly, there was a lot of overperforming for Green Bay. No one really thought that the youngest team in the NFL would be doing this, and rightfully so. It's not normal for the youngest team in the NFL to win a playoff game. It's not really normal for a team as good as Dallas to completely choke at home. So I think Green Bay and San Fran, I like the over at 50.5, and I think this game comes down to the coin toss, like not even kidding, where Green Bay's defense is bad. It can be taken advantage of. Frankly, we still don't really know how good Brock Purdy actually is in the playoffs, and the 49ers did not do well against real good teams, and by real good teams, I mean the Bengals with Joe Burrow, the Baltimore Ravens, the Minnesota Vikings when they were cooking with Kirk. They did very poorly against teams with teeth, teams that can confuse you, teams that get you off schedule, and teams that can get ahead of you. Green Bay's defense, I don't think, can do anything I just described. However, I do think that they can score at will against a pretty poor secondary. It's a matter of, will Jordan Love sort of fold under the pressure of the 49ers pass rush? If he doesn't, we're going to see a high-scoring affair where it might be pretty tight. San Fran will have to try to keep up with Jordan Love, but we have to be sort of realistic and understand that Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead are different. Javon Hargrave's different. Fred Warner's different. Dre Greenlaw's had a down year, but he's been different in the past. And if that front can dictate the way the offense has to play the game for Green Bay, it's going to be a lot easier on what's not a good 49er secondary. So, all that being said, I do think San Fran's a little bit better. I think San Fran can win this game. Same deal as Baltimore, right? 10 points is so many. It just is. And I think that matters, right? 10 points is a ton. And we've seen a lot from Jordan Love and this Packers team to think that they won't fold, that they won't just quit. And they did better against teams that are actually good than they did against bad teams. And a lot of that just comes to the fact that they were 3-6 and went on a really good run. So that's part of it. I need to find some stats real quick. But I it's hard to think positively about the 49ers, right? Because I guess the I'm trying to think of how to word this right, where I think the 49ers are a little not good, right? I think that I think that they're sort of fraudulent, not in the way the Eagles were, obviously. Not in the way the Cowboys are, because obviously they beat these two teams. But, all that being said, I really, really, really don't trust them because their losses were bizarre. The way they acted, the way they went about them, right? Because they lose to Minnesota, right? They lose to Cleveland. Brock Purdy's non-functional. Trent Williams goes down, their left tackle. Deebo Samuel goes down, their number one receiver. And Brock Purdy has no idea how to act, right? Because the math changes. The San Francisco offensive line is not good. And if Trent Williams is not 100%, that gets exacerbated badly, right? Because then he starts losing matchups that he's relied upon to win one-on-one. And when he's hurt, obviously he's out of the game, and that doesn't happen. The rest of the 49ers offensive line is really bad, and they rely entirely on scheme to get things done, which Kyle Shanahan, of course, can get away with because he's Kyle Shanahan. So if Trent isn't 100%, or I could even say if Trent's not even 50%, the offensive line is cooked. If Deebo's not out there, the math of you have to put two people on him, and he's different, right? He runs like a running back with the ball in his hands. It's violent. It's closer to like Isaiah Pacheco than it is, traditional wide receiver. He doesn't glide. He violently stomps his feet all the way to the end zone and does it quickly. So when you have that environment, and you also have Brandon Ayuk, and then you also have Christian McCaffrey, it makes life very, very easy for a quarterback. Their losses were when Deebo goes out and Trent goes out, the offense stops functioning full stop. It's bizarre. It's you've seen offenses sort of have issues when they don't have their best player, but even earlier this year, right? Tua against the Jets, obviously that's a weird example, like played poorly against the Chiefs, but just hear me out, right? The Jets defense is very, very, very good. It just is. It's a great team defense. Like, they play very well. They beat you with coverage. They're not really like kill you with pressure, sacks, blitzes, everything. They drop 7, they drop 8, and then they just win, right? So, with all that being said, I think, sort of rambling a bit here. What I was getting at is Tua, without Tyreek Hill, was able to cook the Jets defense just very easily, right? Part of that's scheme, part of that's Jalen Waddle, part of that's a lot of things. But overall, Miami was able to function at a very, very, very high level against a great defense, despite not having their best offensive player. San Francisco can't do that. I think they could survive without McCaffrey. They could survive without Ayuk. They can't survive without Deebo and Trent. Because as we go over their losses, right, they lose to Cleveland in a tight game. Brock Purdy was horrible. He only had like 125 yards passing. I know it was like a field goal or whatever, but that had no business being a close game whatsoever. The 49ers should have beat them by like 21 conservatively. The fact that they didn't is troubling, and the fact that Purdy couldn't function is troubling because you're going to face good defenses in the playoffs. You're going to face defenses with good defensive players. And then it was a 3-game skid. Then they lose to Minnesota without Justin Jefferson on offense. So their defense has issues, right? Whenever they face any team that has the ability to beat you deep, they lose deep, right? They just do. Brian Flores confused him, and then they were really weird about the injury report. If you guys remember, it was a Monday night game, and they said Brock Purdy had a concussion, but then he played the next week. I don't think he had a concussion. like the way concussions are handled in the NFL, you never see a week turnaround, and they win, right? They just don't. You just don't have that. And then, so, like, they were blaming the concussion for the Vikings loss, which is fine, whatever. That's their story. They're going with it. There's no reason to believe them with how the NFL monitors concussions and concussion protocol and everything like that. He would not have been playing if he actually severely had one and was playing with one. he would not have played against the Bengals the next week. I can tell you that much. Because then he plays against the Bengals, and then he can't function against a Lou Anarumo defense. So you've got two defenses that are very different from each other, giving him issues. And why is that? Because they take away the first read and are very disruptive. And if Deebo Samuel isn't out there forcing a double team, right? So instead of having single coverage across the board, because you have to deal with Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and Deebo Samuel, and Christian McCaffrey occasionally split out wide, without Deebo, you can dedicate two guys to one and then live with one of the other guys beating you. Like the 49ers thrive off of forcing one-on-ones and attacking empty space. They can't do it. Like Brock Purdy can't win by himself in a way some of these other quarterbacks can, and that's what concerns me, right? He's good enough to win a Super Bowl, no doubt, but he's not much better than Jared Goff is. He's not much better than Tua is. He's in a perfect situation, and he's making the most of it, absolutely. But there's like this fantasy land of how good he actually is, because then they rip off a bunch of wins against tomato cans, especially the Eagles. They expose them. And then they face the Ravens, who are the best defense, and Purdy's non-functional, and then they make up the fact that he had a stinger. The 49ers are bizarre with how they like protect Brock Purdy, and he wasn't actually bad. He was injured. He was concussed. It's weird. And I don't trust it at all. They're like, as much as I love Deebo Samuel, as much as I love Trent Williams, as much as I love watching Fred Warner and Brandon Ayuk and all those guys, they are bizarre when it comes to the treatment of Brock Purdy and how they feel the need to protect him from any criticism. Weird. Very weird. The concussion, did he have one, did he not? It's sort of just brushed under the rug. The Bengals defense wasn't particularly good this year, and they still weren't able to function against them. I know Lou Anarumo can scheme up good stuff, but he's not. This was not last year's unit with Jesse Bates and Von Bell back there. This was this year's unit with Dax Hill and getting burned in coverage all the time. So, yeah. Like, I ranted about the 49ers and how much I don't believe in them. I do think they should beat the Packers, but I can't trust them to beat the Packers because I've seen how they play when challenged. I've seen how they play when they're down. They don't get off the mat. They front run. And that's hard to be continuous front runners in the NFL playoffs where you have the best coaches with the best schemes going against each other. And again, if Trent Williams is not 100%, Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith are going to make Brock Purdy's life hell. If the corners are up to the task, right? It's a weird matchup because I can really see Green Bay giving them hell. 49ers could come out of it unscathed. And they could just blow them out, right? That's sort of what they do. They see that you see the jersey colors and they just blow them out. Sort of something that happens in the NFL. Right, it's like what the Packers did to Dallas. So, all that being said, I think the over can hit in this game. That's going to be my best bet. Going to go under, over. It's 50.5. The defenses, Green Bay's defense is pretty weak schematically, unless they were playing possum. They might have just been playing possum the entire time. Who knows? I doubt it. It's the NFL. You don't play possum. It's not like college, right? But if the defense steps up and makes a run, this game is going to be tighter than anyone ever thought it could be. Green Bay shouldn't lose. Green Bay should lose. They're 7th seed playing with house money. But I don't know. They could just line up. The 49ers roster talent just blows them out of the water. But especially vanilla defense with Joe Barry. He's called, Packers fans call him Vanilla Joe Barry. Deservedly so. And I think it's fair to, I think, again, maybe 49ers money line plus the over. If you're into a parlay, get the odds a little plus sign potentially. I think that the over can hit. 50.5 is not a crazy number with the way these two offenses can cook. I don't trust the 49ers back end, and I don't trust them without a lead whatsoever. I think we could see a lot of points in this game. I think we could see the 49ers get close to covering on their own if they're clicking on all cylinders. But it'll be an interesting matchup. I know I went whole diatribe on why I don't trust the 49ers, whatsoever. And it'll be interesting to see if Joe Barry and these other teams that are left in the playoffs are able to implement what the teams that beat the 49ers were able to do to them. So it'll be interesting to see for sure. Which takes me to the next game. A fun game. A Sunday game. We have got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Detroit Lions. Detroit are 6.5-point favorites. The over-under is set at 48.5. And Brett Kollmann had some interesting stats. Brett Kollmann, if you guys don't know, host of the NFL Film Room, his channel, Bootleg Football. Awesome football analyst, breaks down X's and O's. Is about dudes all the way. I love guys who marry analytics with just being a dude, and Kollmann does. So, very interesting there. And he had a couple good stats. So, this is interesting just because Detroit is a touchdown favorite. They did beat Tampa Bay 20-6 early in the year. And I'm finding it real quick. He had some good numbers. Here it is. Okay. The Lions cornerback group has allowed the highest passer rating in the NFL this year when in single coverage. The Buccaneers have Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, of course. Here we go again. The Lions use empty protection 70% of the time, which just means no extra protection, right? No running back chipping, no tight end chipping, no extra tackle, just 5 on whoever, make the right read, get the ball, right? And the Bucs have the third highest blitz rate of the season. Jared Goff is 19th in passer rating against the blitz this year, and 40th in average depth of target versus the blitz, and 37th in big time throw percentage against the blitz. So, the Buccaneers have advantages in 2 obvious situations, which obviously are passing defense, and passing offense. However, despite Vita Vea, who I love a lot, I think that dude's awesome, the Bucs' run defense isn't what it seems to be. Gonna be real. The Bucs' run defense is helped a ton by the fact that they were able to force fumbles and create turnovers on plays DVOA-wise, right? So, and they do have Vita Vea, they do have Levante David. Those guys are awesome. They stuff the run. They do their thing. Antoine Winfield's a monster in the run game. They've got awesome players who play hard defense, and they blitz all the time. They blitz on runs, so they're able to create negative plays in rushing defense and passing defense, because that's what Todd Bowles does. He sends 5 guys every time. Every single time. He's a lunatic, and I kind of love it. So, but I do want to look at yards per game allowed. Rush YPG allowed. NFL. Here we go. So, if you look at yards per game, just straight yards per game. I know the Patriots' yards per game got screwed because of Breece Hall going crazy against the Patriots in the last weekend. But Tampa Bay, where are they? I'm trying to find them. So Tampa Bay does not get run on all the time just because obviously they have Vita Vea, right? Tampa Bay's been run on before. Like they allow about 90 on the road, 90 here, and last year they actually had a really poor run defense. They bounced back this year, but they allow 91.8 at home, 92.9 on the road. It's pretty consistent. And Detroit can run on anybody. They really can. They have a line that can match up with the way the Buccaneers play defense. And the thing is, it's about opponent, right? So I want to take a look at the previous matchup real quick. Lions versus Buccaneers. So, back in October, which is far enough away to, holy crap. So, this actually really matters. It really does. So, Baker did not have a good game. He obviously balled out earlier, right? Jared Goff against the Buccaneers and the way they blitzed and everything, right? Montgomery, I think, got hurt. He only had 6 carries, 14 yards, and this is before they unleashed Jahmyr Gibbs. So all of this context matters. Jared Goff, 30 for 44, 353 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Kind of a monster. And the Lions' defense was balling out earlier in the year. And I know that they're getting guys back. They're getting healthier. All of that stuff. I mean, the Detroit Lions offensive line, unbelievably good. So their offensive line accounts for about 5 yards per carry, that you can give them. That's how good they are. And Jahmyr Gibbs has exploded onto the scene crazy, crazy, crazy good. And when it comes to defensive DVOA, just in general, it's pass tracking everything. The Buccaneers defense ranks 14th overall, right? And the Detroit's ranks 13th overall. And 14th passing, 8th rushing defense. Detroit has the 18th. Wow. Detroit is the number 1 rush rank by DVOA, which is kind of crazy. Well, they play hard, they play downhill, they blitz, all that good stuff. And they have the 16th passing rank, which is, decent. But the thing is, their weighted defense is 27th. There's a lot going wrong with Detroit's defense, but I think that they can function fairly well in this game. I like Detroit a lot. I think their offense is insanely hard to defend because they make you defend different body types, right? It's really hard to match up with them. It takes it takes Jared Goff having a very bad day, and it takes a special defensive unit that can handle all their different body types, that can handle Jahmyr Gibbs, that can handle David Montgomery, that can handle Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it can handle Jameson Williams, because it's damn near impossible to handle all those guys at the same time. As much as the Bucs defense has dudes on it, and they have got a dude at every level with obviously Vita Vea at nose tackle, unbelievable player. Hall of Famer for me. Levante David is a Hall of Famer, no doubt. No doubt whatsoever in my mind that he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. And then you've got Antoine Winfield Jr., who's putting together an unbelievable season at safety. That's frankly more people need to talk about. He's unbelievably good. So, what am I getting at here? I think I looked at the wrong thing. Their weight. So Detroit's weight is actually not that bad at all. They have a high variance based on performance. But last year they were 27th. I was looking at the wrong thing. Damn. Well, that changes things ever so slightly. But yeah, Detroit's passing defense is not great. Their rush defense is good. I think that their passing defense can step up, and we saw it step up against the Rams, who are, frankly, a much better offense than Tampa Bay. I know Baker's been balling and everything, but Tampa Bay does not have the rushing attack that the Rams have. They don't have they do. Stafford's better than Baker, but they don't. The Rams aren't as creative. Dave Canales is I think he's a great play caller. He's not Sean McVay. And while Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are amazing, the Rams held Cooper Kupp in check, and they had a couple coverage busts against Puka, but they really didn't. They really buckled down later in the game, in the second half, especially when the offense started to struggle and Aaron Donald decided that it was his game, because when he does that, it's crazy. So you have Detroit looking a little more vulnerable to people than I think. I think statistically they look more vulnerable than they actually are. What Brett Coleman was talking about, I think, gives credence to potentially betting a Buccaneers cover. I kind of love the over. I think there's going to be points to be had in this game. I think 48.5, right? So we're looking at 28-20. We're looking at 28-24. We're looking at 30-20. I think both these teams are going to move the ball. Detroit does cover. That's sort of what they do. And yeah, I think that Detroit has a real shot to win this game. The last game of the weekend, which is a matchup everyone's been waiting for. The Kansas City Chiefs facing the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. Patrick Mahomes' first road playoff game that is not a neutral site. And frankly, Buffalo beat them early in the year. I know Buffalo's defense is banged up. They were banged up when they played them earlier. The Kansas City pass catchers are not good. Travis Kelce is not particularly good. The Bills are much different, much better team at home. And just head to head, right? Buffalo has won the last 2 meetings. And they haven't hosted a game since 2020, which is crazy. October 19th was 2020 was the last time the Buffalo Bills hosted Kansas City. Right? So it's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and obviously Kansas City has beaten them in the playoff games. Buffalo has beaten them in the regular season. I think Buffalo does it again. I think Buffalo is just an overall better team than Kansas City this year. Both teams have been horribly inconsistent. Both teams have shown weakness. But the difference is that Josh Allen has been better at putting on the Superman cape than Patrick Mahomes has been this year. Kansas City has real issues. They got issues like, yes, they beat Miami in an Ice Bowl where Miami was missing 7 defensive starters and they were missing 3 starting offensive linemen. Like, what are we doing here? We can't take that win 26-7 against it, like, in the cold with a team that's walking wounded. We can't take that win and then decide that's who Kansas City is, because they're not. They just aren't. Buffalo, we could look at Buffalo beating, like, they let the Steelers creep back into the game. They beat the hell out of Pittsburgh pretty quickly, pretty decisively, and just sort of played conservative the rest of the way. I think Buffalo in this game, they have to win it. I think they're hosting it. Having the home field advantage is going to matter. Schematically, McDermott does well against Patrick Mahomes in recent years. Forces them to tighten up, forces them to make tighter throws, especially without Tyreek Hill. Rashee Rice is kind of that dude. But Buffalo's just been playing hard. I think they haven't lost in a while. They're on a 6-game win streak. I think that matters. And good coaching staffs and good coaches will adjust to what bothers their opposing team. Patrick Mahomes played horrifically against the Raiders, and whatever you can tap into that idea. Not every team can have Max Crosby. That's part of it. But the Kansas City tackles are so bad. And Buffalo has really good players on the edge. Not even Von Miller, right? Ed Oliver can kick out and be disruptive. Almost as like a 4-tech, where he lines up between the guard and tackle. Disrupt them that way. You can AJ Epinesa is a good ball player. Greg Rousseau is a good ball player. So you've got these really good defensive pieces. And I think Buffalo will be able to contain Kansas City. It's just a matter of Buffalo and not getting overwhelmed by Steve Spagnuolo. I think Stephon Diggs needs to show up. I think that James Cook needs to have a big game. And I think that Khalil Shakir also needs to continue playing well. So, all that being said, I think Buffalo wins this game. They're 8-1 at home on the year, with their one home loss being like the call to Jesus moment where they fired Ken Dorsey and just put Joe Brady in there. And Brady's been better at consistently putting together drives and has a better feel for game flow, I believe. So I think he'll be able to continue that. And yeah, that's how I think the games are going to go this week. Take Buffalo in the cover. So yeah, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you everybody for liking. Peace.